guys, Merry Christmas. Today also I gonna read this book for chapter 2. Let's get started. The product manager role. Chapter 2. What is PM? The PM is the responsible for making sure that a team ships a great product. Some people will say that the product manager, sometimes called the program manager or project manager, is like a mini CEO of their product. That's accurate in some ways, since the PM takes holistic responsibility for the product from the little details to the big picture. The PM needs to set vision and strategy. The PM defines success and makes decisions. But in one of the most important ways, the description of the product manager as CEO misses the boat. The product managers don't have direct authority over the people on their team. As a PM, you will need to learn to lead your team without authority, influencing them with your vision and research. Product managers are highly respected at most companies, but not more so than engineers. If you show up and start bossing people around, you'll probably find it hard to get things done. After all, engineers are the ones actually building the product. You need them on your side. One reason product management is such an appealing career is you get to sit at the intersections of technology, business, and design. You get to wear many hats and learn multiple points of view. As a product manager, you'll be the advocate for the customer. You will learn their needs and translate those needs into product goals and features. Then you'll make sure those features are built in a cohesive, well-designed way that actually solves the customer's needs. You'll focus on everything from the big picture to the small details. One day you might brainstorm the 3-year build visions for your team, while the next day you work through the details of the buttons in a dialogue. Work through. Product management is a highly collaborative role. The product manager usually serves as the main liaison between the engineering and other roles such as design, quality assurance, user research, data analysis, marketing, sales, customer support, business development, legal, content writers, other engineering teams, and executive team. It's usually the job of the product manager to identify times when one of those teams should be brought in and to fill in them if they don't exist. Functions of PM. The day-to-day work of a product manager varies over the course of the product lifecycle. At the beginning, you'll be figuring out what to build. In the middle, you'll help the team make progress. At the end, you'll be preparing for the launch. So the first phase is the research and planning, the second phase is design, and the third phase is the implement and test, and fourth phase is release. While the product lifecycle varies by company and sometimes even by team, it usually follows a general pattern of research and plan, design, implement, and test and release. Of course, these frequently overlapped and fit back into each other. Some companies or teams split the product manager role across two people, the more business-focused person and the more engineering-focused person. When companies make the split, they call the engineering-focused person the technical program manager or technical product manager (TPM), a program manager or technical product manager (TPM), and they call the business-focused person the product manager (PM). When the team has a TPM and a PM, a product manager focuses on research and planning and release, while the technical product manager is more focused on design and implement and test. For example, the product manager will research the market and define the requirements. The TPM will work with the PM to translate those requirements into the specific featured work required, and then facilitates the engineering team as they build it. Research and planning phase. All products and features start with research and planning. This is the time when the PM is starting to think about what to build next. The next idea may come from a customer request, competitive analysis, new technology, user research, the sales or marketing teams, brainstorming, or the big vision for the product. Depending on the scope of the role, a big part of the product manager's job is this phase is creating or proposing a roadmap. This means figuring out a cohesive long-term plan for the team. The PM talks to all possible resources to create a large list of potential features or development work. Then based on factors like customer needs, the competitive landscape, business needs, and the team's expertise, he prioritizes the features and scenarios. Once the PM has a proposed roadmap, he needs to bring other people on board. Some companies such as Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon have a top-down approval process where executives and directors get involved very early. Other companies such as Google, Facebook, and many startups have a more bottom-up approach where the PM focuses on winning over the engineers. Once they choose a feature set, the product manager becomes the expert on them. He'll think deeply about the problems. He will try to solve the goal of the features. In the coming phases, everyone on the team will have questions, including why are we working on this? And the PM will need to have answers. This is also the time when the PM starts defining succeed. He'll envision what the words looks like if the team is successful. Many companies use the model of objective and key results, OKRs, to communicate the most important goal of the team. In this model, the PM works with the team to come up with the measurable results that it can commit to. Design phase. Once the PM has formed agreement on what the team is going to build, it's time to design the products and features. Product design does not just mean user interface UI design, or drawing out what the product will look like. Product design is defining the features and functionality of the product. The PM roles in the product design varies substantially between companies and teams. On some teams, especially shipped software, as opposed on online software teams at Microsoft, the PM will write up a detailed functional specifications spec that includes things like goals, use cases, and requirements. Wireframes, bullet points describing every possible state of the feature, and internalization and security. The spec will then spend weeks being inspected, reviewed, and iterated on by developers, testers, and other PMs. On these teams, the PM is expected to make every user-facing decision. Other teams have much looser specs and a more rapid design process. The PM might sit down with the interaction designer and chat about the goal and brainstorm on the whiteboard, and then iterate by giving feedback on the designer's mockup. When the mockups are ready, the PM might send them to engineers with just a few sentences in an email. On these teams, the engineer will generally make easy product decisions as they come up and call the PM over to ask about the more difficult ones. And for some teams, especially at Apple, and the design is done mostly by a dedicated design team with the minimal inputs from the PM. Once those teams, the PM might focus more on product management and fighting fires as they come up. Since the product manager's role in the product design can vary so much across teams, it's a great thing to ask about during your interview. Ask about who will be working with your core and extended team. Find out how much of your time will be spent writing specs and how much you will be working with designers. Learn where the balance is between PMs, designers, and engineers in making product decisions. Implements and tests. A PM works isn't done once the engineers start coding. During the implementation stage, the product manager keeps track of how the product is going and make the adjustments. During the implementation, one of the most important parts of the job is helping the engineers work efficiently. The product manager will check in regularly with his team and learn how things are going. Often, an engineer will be blocked because she's waiting for work with another team. In this case, the PM will need to find the other tasks for the engineer, and in the meantime, the work with the other team to get the work finished more promptly. Sometimes implementations of the feature will turn out to be harder than anticipated, and the PM will look for ways to change the feature to make it easier to implement. If an engineer is running behind schedule, the product manager can review the scheduled work carefully and cut lower priority work. During the implementations, the product manager will also start gathering feedback and reporting bugs on the early versions of the product. Sometimes, a feature that looked good during the design phase will not work as well as expected once it's used in the real world. To find problems like this, teams will do usability studies, run experiments, and do internal dogfooding. Dogfooding comes from the term "eat your own dog food" and simply means that using your own product yourself. For example, that the people at the Microsoft run early versions of the next Windows released on their computers every day. The Facebook employees use Facebook group to communicate. Sometimes that the teams needs to more creative to find ways to use their own products. For example, that the Google gives employees at AdWords budgets and encourage people to create advertising campaigns to make sure they get enough dogfooding. Another way to find out if a product will work before it's launched is through usability studies. In a usability study, participants try out early prototypes of a new product or feature. Usually the participants are given a scenario or goal, and then they'll try to use the prototype to accomplish the goal. Large companies usually have a user researcher who develops and runs the study with some inputs from the product manager. At smaller companies, the PM might run the studies. In both cases, by watching a handful of studies, PMs can see where people struggle and identify key usability issues. While dogfooding and usability studies are great for getting qualitative feedback, running experiments is a way to get quantitative feedback when you have online software. In an experiment, the new feature is turned on for a percentage of users, the experiment group, and while the rest of the users, the control group, kept using the product without new feature. For online software, it's common for all new features to be launched gradually as experiments. In experiments, you can measure the specific metrics for the new features, such as how many people click on a new button you added, as well as overall success metric like user engagement and retention and revenue. By comparing the success metrics between the experiments and control groups, you can tell how successful the new feature is. As feedback comes in through dogfooding, usability studies, and experiments, the PM identifies the most important issues and iterates on the feature design to find better solutions. Prioritization is one of the product manager's most important functions at this point. If the team were to fix every bug and build every new feature idea, the product would never launch. The PM needs to consider all of the new requests and decide if they should be prioritized for the current release or punt to later time. Released. When the development process is finished, the program manager needs to make sure the launch goes smoothly. The launch process varies from team to team, but usually involves things like running through a launch checklist. There might be final approvals from key stakeholders like legal and the coordination steps with teams like marketing and operations. Make sure that the teams who will support the products going forward are prepared. For web products, this might be the customer service team. For hardware products, it could be the manufacturing team. For a service-based product, it could be the operations teams. Preparing for all the things that could go wrong. As the release nears, urgent issues inevitably pop up, and PM thinks on her feet to fight the fires. After a successful launch, the PM usually announces the launch to the rest of the company, celebrates with the team, and then prepares to do it all over again. Depending on the team, the PM might continue to support the product after the launch, gathering metrics and iterating on user feedback, or the product might be handed over to another team for the operations and the maintenance. Now it's the 20 pages. 오랜만에 읽으니까 목이 좀 아픈데 6페이지를 읽었어요. 그러면 이제 다음부터는 how the chapter 2, how the type of product affects the PM job을 할 예정이고요. 그 다음에 top things about the product management가 from 1 to 10 있고 product managers and program managers의 차이에 대해서 말하고 나면 챕터 2 끝날 예정입니다. 네, 또 뵐게요. 안녕.